here at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown, as I am every Saturday morning. But today is a very special Saturday morning because it's finally rivalry week. It's my favorite week in college football, in the SEC, in college football in general. It's my absolute favorite week. So I'm very fired up for the slate of games today. Hope everyone had a very safe and happy Thanksgiving and continue to have a great rest of your holiday weekend. So like I said, I am at 312 Pizza Company. So if you want to come out here, watch the games for the day, absolutely recommend that you do so. It's one of my favorite places to come out and watch a game, grab food, grab a ton of local beers. So come out to 312 Pizza Company. They will have a huge showing for the Civil War game. Oregon State, Oregon. Oregon could clinch the Pac-12 North with a win over their division rival, Oregon. And I know a couple Oregon State fans who will be gracing their presence at 312 Pizza Company. So I definitely recommend that you come out and watch the Civil War game here at 312 Pizza Company. They're also hiring. So if you're looking for some extra money on the side, if you're looking for a gig to pick up, they're hiring waiters and waitresses positions, back of house positions, front of house positions, bartending positions. So come out 312 Pizza Company and fill out an application if you are looking for some sort of job opportunity. But like I said, it is rivalry week. My absolute favorite week in college football. We had the Egg Bowl on Thursday, always an exciting game. Especially this year, between two teams that have just really proven themselves to be kind of like bona fide threats in the SEC West. So enjoyed the Egg Bowl thoroughly on Thursday on Thanksgiving Day. But today, you've got a much bigger slate. You've got Georgia, the number one team in the country, going into Georgia Tech. The opening spread here was Georgia minus 34.5, which sounds so comical. And if you tune in to Southeastern CaroLINES last week, you would have heard me say that I took Vanderbilt plus 36.5 against Ole Miss because I thought 36 was such a ridiculous number of points. And Vanderbilt covered, and it was a lot closer game than we expected. So you may hear me say that I'm taking Georgia minus 34.5 and say, wait, you said 36.5 was way too big of a point spread to feel comfortable about putting money down on. But I do. I'm going to take Georgia minus 34.5 because not only are they the best team in the country, they're blowing out every single team that they play. So last time the Georgia and Georgia Tech played was in the 2019 season, because last year the SEC was playing only in SEC games. So they played last time in 2019. Georgia beat Georgia Tech 52-7, and this Georgia team is much better than that 2019 team. No knock on the 2019 team, but this team is very much so far and above the best team in college football. So Georgia's looking to finish out a perfect 12-0 season. They're looking to cruise into the SEC championship. They've very much so proven themselves to be the best defense in college football, the best team in college football. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech is 3-7. Last week, Georgia handled Charleston Southern handedly, 54-7. So that's going to shut down any of this. Oh, Georgia's not going to prepare as much for this game because it's Georgia Tech and it's not an SEC game, and it's not going to be any sort of threat to their schedule as much, or, they're not going to fight as hard against a non-SEC opponent, so they're not going to necessarily cover. I mean, that's going to shut down all of that talk because Georgia was able to handle Charleston Southern handedly. They would have covered the spread in that case last week. But, have you heard Kirby Smart's hype speech? If you haven't heard it, I highly recommend that you tune into it because it's enough to get anyone riled up for anything, even if it is Georgia Tech. But like I said, Georgia is just absolutely pummeling all of their opponents. And as for Georgia Tech, they fell to Notre Dame last week, got shut out by Notre Dame 55-0. They really couldn't get anything going, obviously, without score, but they just could not get anything going in that game. They could not get the ball moving. And on the other side, through 11 games, Georgia's scoring almost 41 points. They're only giving up 7.5 points on average. Georgia Tech is averaging 26 points and giving up 32.5. So Georgia is just so much so favored. Like, they even need to explain that to anyone who's watched a second of college football this year. That Georgia is going to be able to handle Georgia Tech and do it handedly. Georgia Tech is 1-6 against the spread in its last 7 games. So I'm going to take Georgia against the spread minus 34.5 there. Florida State, Florida, which usually is a pretty exciting game because usually these are two pretty good teams, but this year it is just bad on bad. Now, Florida opened as a 2.5-point favorite. They both currently sit at 5-6. So it's kind of, loser go home, winner go to a bowl game. Knowing that a bowl game is at stake, knowing that Florida has a new coach coming in next year, I mean, everything in Florida is just kind of up in the air right now. And Florida's, honestly, on paper, is the more skilled team. If I saw this, I would easily take Florida -2.5 if you haven't watched Florida football in the past month. But since October 9th, their only win is against Vanderbilt. And they allowed 52 points. They did beat Samford, but they allowed 52 points to an FCS program in Samford. Their defense is completely checked out. Ever since Dan Mullen fired their defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, the defense has been completely checked out, obviously, giving up 52 points to Samford and losing to South Carolina and losing to Missouri. I just don't think that Florida is as good of a team. But if Samford can score 52, Florida State can obviously score just as many. So I'm picking Florida State to upset Florida. I'm picking Florida State on the money line plus 115. Florida just kind of seems like they've got nothing else to play for. I mean, playing for a bowl game, but really, how much does that mean to this Florida program? So I'm going to take Florida State to upset the Gators, taking Florida State on the money line plus 115. Iron Bowl. Always a very, very fun game to watch during rivalry week. Number 2, Alabama, which that just shifted, and the college football playoff polls down to number 3. But Alabama at Auburn, the spread is currently set at 19.5. So last time they played this game last year, Alabama got Florida on the brain. Alabama won by a score of 42-13. Alabama didn't allow an Auburn touchdown until late in the fourth quarter in that game last year. But Auburn always seems to get Alabama a little bit of trouble. They've beaten Alabama twice over the last 4 years. So this is not an Alabama-dominated rivalry in recent years. Last week, Alabama played Arkansas. Bryce Young threw for almost 600 yards, 559 yards, and 5 touchdowns from the freshman. Alabama currently ranks 8th in the nation in passing yards, 344 passing yards a game on average, 2nd in the nation, averaging 44.5 points per game. Only Ohio State has scored more. Alabama's offense has just been lights out. But Auburn last week lost their 3rd game in a row, lost to South Carolina 21-17. South Carolina held Auburn to just 3 points in the last 3 quarters of the game. South Carolina is not a very good team, y'all. And Auburn could not seem to get things going. TJ Finley, their backup in for Bo Nix, who was out with an ankle injury, went just 17-32 with 188 yards and a touchdown. I mean, this kid's not ready. Last week I thought he was. I picked Auburn to win -7.5. I thought he was ready with his experience at LSU. This kid's not ready to start in the SEC, and the Alabama defense is going to spook this kid to no end. I think Alabama wins this one. I think they win big, and I think that this is going to be a game where Nick Saban wants to make a statement, especially with how close Alabama has played in some of their lower tier opponents against Florida, against LSU. I think that Nick Saban is going to want to make a statement to the College Football Playoff Committee and also to the SEC and say, hey, we're just as good as we've always been. So I'm taking Alabama to cover the spread at Auburn, 19.5. Again, this is Southeastern CaroLINES, and I am your host, Caroline Fenton. I'm live at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. So come up to 312 Pizza Company. I know for sure they'll be showing the Civil War game, Oregon State, Oregon. They're going to be showing all the best games of the day. So make sure to come out to 312 Pizza Company and watch some of those games. We appreciate them for hosting me every week. We've also got a little in-state rivalry. Vanderbilt heading down to Knoxville, taking on Tennessee. Tennessee opens up as a 31.5-point favorite. Last year, Tennessee beat Vanderbilt 42-17. Tennessee enters this one with a completely new mindset, new coach, new quarterback, completely new offense. This is a different team than we have seen wear the orange and white as of recent. They clinched their bowl eligibility last week with a 60-14 win over South Alabama. The second time this year that Tennessee's hit that 60-point threshold. The first time this season was against Missouri with a 62-24 win. Tennessee currently sits at 6-5 overall, 3-4 in the SEC. Beating Vanderbilt would secure their 500 spot in the SEC. And honestly, Josh Heupel gets an A from me for this season. What he has been able to do didn't necessarily show up in wins and losses in the wins and loss column, but just the way that Josh Heupel has been able to get those players to buy into him, into the program, and the way that he's been able to transform this offense, he gets an A from me. So I think that Tennessee wins it big here because Vanderbilt is coming in with their first year head coach in Clark Lee. They're on a 6-game losing streak. 2-9 overall, 0-7 in the SEC. This hasn't been a very good year for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's been 4-1 against the spread in the last 5 games. And I think that's because Vanderbilt is so underrated. And I think Vegas sees that Vanderbilt has lost several games by 20-plus points and really wants to ride that. Tennessee is 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 games against Vanderbilt. But this is a different Tennessee game. Tennessee hasn't won a game in this series by 31.5 points, by this much, by that many points since 2003. So I think everything that history is really leaning toward take Vanderbilt plus 31.5. Tennessee is going to win big, but Vanderbilt's going to cover that spread. I don't think that's the case, though. All of the teams that Tennessee has played with a losing record, all of them are non-SEC teams. South Alabama, Bowling Green, Tennessee Tech. They've beaten all of those opponents by 32-plus points, which would give you that 31.5-point cover. I know that Vanderbilt was only a red zone interception away from only losing by 7 points to Ole Miss last week. The spread on that game was 36.5. They didn't lose by that much. I think that was more so an element of Ole Miss overlooking Vanderbilt, focusing on Mississippi State, focusing on the Egg Bowl, and kind of, looking at Vanderbilt and saying, okay, we just need to get past this team. I think that was way more of Ole Miss's blunder than it was Vanderbilt's success. So I am going to take Tennessee to cover this one, 31.5. So that Alabama is going to want to make a statement win against Auburn. I think Tennessee is going to want to do the exact same thing here. Assert their dominance as the in-state rival. I think Tennessee is going to want to win big here. We've also got a fun little game, if anyone remembers, back to 2018, I believe, the 7 overtime game. Got a repeat of that one. Hopefully not a 7 overtime repeat, but 16-ranked Texas A&M traveling to Baton Rouge, taking on LSU. The spread here is Texas A&M minus 6.5. Last year, Texas A&M beat LSU 20-7. LSU's program is in just as much disarray, if not more disarray, than they were in 2020. And LSU, honestly, the past 2 weeks haven't looked so bad. They played a ranked SEC team in 3 of their last 4 games, other than Louisiana Monroe. They kept Alabama and Arkansas close, but LSU just couldn't find a way to win. And I think that that's this team's biggest problem. They have a ton of talent, but they just aren't able to capitalize on some of the opportunities that they're given against these good opponents that they're playing in Alabama, in Arkansas, and they just can't close. I mean, A&M suffered a really crucial loss to Ole Miss 2 weeks ago, squashing any chance they had to get to Atlanta. Because after beating Alabama, I thought it was a legitimate chance that Texas A&M could find a way to get to the SEC championship. But Texas A&M has one of the best defenses in the country. They should easily be able to handle LSU's offense and a young quarterback in Max Johnson. LSU's 89th in the country in yards per play, 83rd in the country in yards per game. LSU's offense has struggled, very much so. It won't be able to get the ball moving against this Texas A&M defense. They've had a tough time with it all season. A ton of injuries. They're dealing with on both sides of the ball. Their number 1 wide receiver out. Their number 1 corners are out. I'm taking Texas A&M by a touchdown. I'm taking Texas A&M to cover 6.5 in Death Valley against LSU. We've also got Kentucky at Louisville, a little in-state rivalry there, a little basketball bowl going on there. The opening spread was Louisville minus 2.5, which I was a little bit surprised by. But I mean, last week, Malik Cunningham had himself a day. The Cardinals quarterback racked up 527 yards of total offense, 7 touchdowns, 5 passing, 2 rushing. A 62-22 beatdown of Duke last week. I mean, Louisville has really progressed a lot over this season. If you remember them playing Ole Miss earlier in the season, it didn't look like a very polished team. I still wouldn't have picked Louisville to be favored in this game. Kentucky's run defense is one of the best in the country. It's top 20 nationally. They're only allowing 114.5 yards per game. I think that Kentucky knows that they're going to have to shut down Malik Cunningham and Louisville's run threat. So if they do that, they're going to force him to throw, which obviously he very much so can do, but it just makes Louisville and Malik Cunningham so much less of a threat. So I'm actually going to pick Kentucky here. I'm going to take them on the money line. I think that Kentucky started the season on such a high note, and they've been knocked down and knocked down and knocked down as of late in the past few weeks. I think that they're going to want to finish this one out on a high note. I think that Mark Stoops knows that this is an important game to the people of Kentucky, and he is going to want to stay atop in-state recruiting and just to make that statement win today at Louisville. So that's going to do it for me today. Happy rivalry week, as I said. I hope everyone had a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. But we will be back next week for the SEC Championship, Georgia, Alabama, in Atlanta. I'll have all of your betting advice, some prop bets, anything that you need to know going into the SEC Championship. But enjoy your rivalry week, and I'll see y'all next week.